pasta in Italian means paste. And that makes perfect sense because basically there's only 3 ingredients to this food. Flour, but not just any flour, a tiny bit of water, and eggs. No salt, and more importantly, no leavening. So this truly is a paste. But this humble little food can be turned into the most amazing meals in all different shapes, sizes, and variations. That's what we're doing today. But of course, we've got to put an 1800s twist on it, mainly in the tools and the ingredients that we're using. Let's get to work. Push, push, roll, push, 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 slide.
Now, how common would pasta have been on a homestead out west, back when this was the frontier? Well, if you were a son or daughter of the Revolution, and you came west, maybe you were a reader of Thomas Jefferson, then pasta may very well have been in your family's repertoire of recipes. The 18th century saw the explosion of knowledge of the noodle and the invention of new pasta varieties, like this one that we're making today. We could make 100 different shapes from 3 humble ingredients: flour, eggs, touch of water. But the kids and I want to try our hand at a pasta previously unknown to us, Garganelli. The history of it is rather charming and not exactly ancient. Invented in the 18th century, this is how the story goes. In the home of an Italian cardinal, the cook ran out of filling while making stuffed cappelletti. With a bunch of already cut squares of pasta, she grabbed her weaving comb and rolled the pasta into a tube, leaving defined ridges from the comb. The ridges held the sauce that she had prepared with it, and voila! Garganelli became an Italian staple. Now, we don't have an 1800s weaving comb, but we do have 2 wholly average items that I think can step in to do the trick for us.
Now, these tools are not fancy. A fork and an old paintbrush. But I think we're gonna be able to get the job done. And that's exactly what a homesteader out here, this was a meal you could make with 3 simple ingredients, and you probably just used the tools you had lying around. You did not have specialty tools out here on the prairie. That would have been pretty rare. Yeah, if you're doing thousands and thousands of little pasta shapes, you're gonna want those tools, but we don't need them.
Out here in a one-room cabin, you weren't going to have much in the way of specialized tools. There just wasn't room for it. And speaking of that era though, the path to finding a more detailed recipe, it isn't so easy. 1800s recipes were passed down through generations of home cooks. They weren't written down. So I cracked open our old turn-of-the-century cookbook that collected recipes from early Montana settlers, and I started searching for pasta. And I did come across some recipes. I found 2 for using macaroni, which apparently came in long noodles that you had to snap into lengths yourself. Kind of interesting. And then there was also 1 recipe for, quote, noodles. Beat 2 eggs well without separating. Add slowly 1/2 teacup of flour, or a little more, and a saltspoon of salt until you have quite a stiff dough. Flour your board well, lay the dough upon it, and roll out into a sheet as thin as paper. Fold over and over, and with a sharp knife, cut strips 1/8 of an inch wide. Shake to unroll. Boil 15 minutes in salted water.
How many scoops?
2.
2? They say 4? They say we want it as salty as the sea.
Then this part was interesting. It calls for you to serve with breadcrumbs browned in butter and to pour melted butter over the noodles. So there we have it, a late 1800s recipe for pasta. Of course, no matter how simple the ingredients or humble the food, there are often a bunch of tips and tricks that you have to know to get this to work. And we ran into exactly this quagmire while attempting this recipe.
There's really no other way to do this part except by getting your hands dirty and mixing it in.
There's a timing to dough. When to let it rest, when to let it slightly dry on clean white dish towels. Skip the steps and you're sorry. Ask me how I know. So here's the basic recipe. 2 teacups of flour, 2 eggs, and a tablespoon or 2 of clean water. Make a well in the flour into which you crack the eggs. Okay. Then with a fork, start slowly mixing. It's gonna feel like there's nowhere near enough liquid, but keep going.
Remember, break the yolks up.
As it just comes to a shaggy dough, stop. Give it a minute or two to rest.
Oh, that water is getting hot. Woo! Don't touch it. Very hot. I think I am gonna slide it over.
Of course, all the while you have to be monitoring the stove and, very importantly, monitoring a big pot of water for washing up hands, washing up tools. You can't just flip on a faucet and get hot water out here in this one-room cabin.
Hot! Hot! Woo!
So that means sliding an enameled bowl full of clean water, not just along the top of the stove, but down onto the floor, sometimes onto a counter. But with little kids around, the floor is safe. And we can all help with dishes once that water cools down just a bit.
So much fun, isn't it?
Show me the paste you've made.
That paste.
Now, that shaggy dough has come together and we've given it just a minute to hydrate and rest. Then jump back in with your hands and start kneading. And keep kneading. Old accounts say 10, 12, 15 minutes of kneading by hand. But as you do it, it's going to come together and be worth it. Now, you'd think with all that kneading that you'd end up with something like sourdough bread, but you won't. And that all comes down to the number one major trick for pasta making. The first trick? Using the right flour. All-purpose will get you by, but the Italians have a secret, and that is the variety of wheat that they use. It's very particular, and it has a unique inability to develop the gluten that causes rising in bread. It's the anti-bread flour, which makes it perfect for pasta.
The best pastas from Italy are made with a flour called durum, and it is a wheat, but it is a special variety of wheat. And in addition to the Rouge de Bordeaux historic wheat that we grew on the ranch this year, we grew durum this year. This flour is pretty special. It's not your average all-purpose stuff. This is the flour we grew on the ranch, and Robbie milled it just a couple days ago. It's the first time we've really fired up this Ukrainian stone mill that we ordered. Been quite a few months now, but we just haven't been ready to buckle down and learn how to use it. This is the first bag, and we're gonna use it today. We dedicated a whole field to it because we wanted to do a test of this specific variety. This is not your run-of-the-mill white flour. In fact, if you make bread with it, well, it won't work. It is specifically designed for pasta and pizza, but pasta is the one I've been just itching to make. And I'll be honest, it is not something we make very often, but the kids and I have been testing. We did a whole test yesterday on how to do it. We are learning, and getting to learn with this type of flour is really unique.
So, we have our ball of well-kneaded dough. Now we have to let it rest. A half an hour should do it, and the difference is going to be night and day. We'll go from a slightly dry, shaggy dough to a true, moist paste. That durum is going to hydrate, but since there's no leavening and the durum itself doesn't build gluten bonds in the way that bread would, this will be exactly the same size, but it's going to have a glossy, lovely appearance. But we have to wait.
That is heavy. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, we need to put down newspapers.
just scoop the poke out.
Oh,
And light a candle. Light the candle.
What says the end of October more than a pumpkin moonshine?
Pretty good
And one
knife
carved
for
from a
this.
pumpkin we grew 10 feet outside of this cabin. The deer, the elk, and the voles, they got 90% of this garden, I won't lie. But we are going to take the luxury of one pumpkin for frivolous fun. Games, toys, kids play. Yes, these may come second to survival. It's true. But carving a pumpkin is a joy of childhood that even the most humble homesteader could have enjoyed together as a family. And after it's carved and enjoyed, you could still eat it. So nothing lost.
a wee story for a very sweet wee person. Sylvie Ann was visiting her grandmummy in Connecticut. It was Halloween, and Sylvie wanted to make a pumpkin moonshine. So she put on her bonnet and started out for the cornfield to find the largest and finest pumpkin. The cornfield was on top of the hill, quite away from the house, so Sylvie took Wiggy for company. The hill was very steep, When they reached the field, Sylvie looked among the shocks of corn for the very fattest pumpkin. It was so very big that Sylvie couldn't lift it, so instead she rolled it across the field, just the way you roll big snowballs in wintertime. But when Sylvie and Wiggy and the pumpkin came to the edge of the field, where the ground sloped down into the barnyard below, the pumpkin began running away. It leapt over stones and bushes, bumpity-bump, bump, faster and faster down the hill with Sylvie and Wiggy rushing after it.
The dog looks like a cat.
It frightened the goats, terrified the hens, enraged the geese as it tore into the barnyard at a truly dreadful speed. But worst of all, it bumped right into Mr. Hemmelscamp, who was carrying a pail full of whitewash. It did not stop until it hit the side of the house, ker-thumpity-bumpity-thump. Sylvie Ann was a very polite little girl, so of course she helped Mr. Hemmelscamp to his feet before going after the pumpkin. She apologized to the goats and the poultry too. Then Sylvie went to her grandpop and told him what had happened. So he came out and cut the top off of that runaway pumpkin. Sylvie scooped all the seeds and pulp out. And then Grandpop made eyes and a nose and a big grinning mouth with horrid crooked teeth. It was evening by then, so they put a lighted candle inside the pumpkin to make him look as fierce and horrid as all true pumpkin moonshines should. Sylvie and Grandpop put the pumpkin moonshine on the front gate post, and then they hid in the bushes to watch how terrified the passers-by would be at the sight of this fierce pumpkin moonshine. They had a wonderful time. Sylvie Ann saved the pumpkin seeds, and next spring she planted them. The vines grew up and ran all over the cornfield with lots of pumpkins on them, just waiting to be made into pumpkin pies and pumpkin moonshines to please good little girls like Sylvie Ann. The end.
The end.
Go!
Okay, that pasta dough has rested. It is ready for the tricky step. You can see that the slight roughness and shagginess of the dough before it rested is gone. Now it's smooth. It's officially a paste. It looks hydrated and shiny, which means we're ready to roll it out. So on a slab of stone dusted with more durum flour, I'm rolling it into a primitive square. As thin as paper is what's called for. And I'll admit that my biggest failure so far has been being unable to get it that thin. It's doable, but just know that the thinner, the better. But of course, too thin and it will rip. And this has to go into boiling water after all and hold together. So this step is one of getting the feel, and I'm not there yet. But with practice, hopefully one day I will be. So it's becoming one big thin sheet of dough, and then it must be cut into squares. One unique thing you'll notice about this dough is the color. It is a very golden yellow. And that's for two reasons. One, the ranch eggs with their bright yolks, happy chickens after all. But two, because durum wheat itself is very golden in color, much more than other varieties.
This is durum flour, sometimes called semolina flour, often grown in Italy. Their climate tends to grow really good durum. And interestingly enough, Montana grows pretty darn good durum too. It has to do with the fact that we are a somewhat arid place, so we don't get a lot of rainfall, which means that that wheat plant has to struggle and work to produce that little wheat berry. And that wheat berry is what gets ground between two big granite stones, and out of it comes flour. But that flour in and of itself isn't quite usable for this. So we have to sift it until it's really, really fine, close to a 00 flour. Ours, because it is stone ground and the way we've grown it and the method in which we've ground it, it's got quite a bit of flavor and that little extra tooth to it. So it's a really special flour.
Now, we have to lay down a clean white dish towel. If the flour is trick number 1, the periodic drying of the pasta is trick number 2. And you really can't forget to do it.
So in reading up on pasta, there seems to be some good advice that says after you've rolled it thin and cut it into 1.5 by 1.5 squares, lay it on a clean tea towel, just let it dry for 15 minutes. I thought I could skip that part and just go for it, but the dough is too tacky and it sticks to the tools that we have up next. Now, these tools are not fancy. We don't have a special board. We don't have a special dowel for rolling this. We are going to use a fork and an old paintbrush, but I think we're gonna be able to get the job done. Okay, so I'm gonna take these little squares that are dusted with the durum flour. Let's put them on our fork. Next step.
So those squares where they touch the white towel have dried slightly, and I put that side around my makeshift dowel. As the dough rolls around the paintbrush, we are pressing down, leaving ridges indented in it from the fork. This is that signature look of Garganelli. And thanks to the drying time, the pasta slips off of the wooden brush nice and easy.
1.
If we had failed to do our steps right, well, everything sticks to everything, and the kids get lots of lumps of Play-Doh to use.
All right, will you hold the paintbrush?
Yeah, it's Play-Doh.
It is Play-Doh.
Then you can eat.
Yes.
We've been there. Sometimes a slightly wet fork or wet tool can ease the pasta off too, but that gets pretty messy. Better to just do this timing right.
Push, 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 roll, push, 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 slide.
One by one, the kids and I shape each piece. It's very satisfying, just methodical work. Maggie has the movements down pat. She can do this on her own. Each finished one goes onto a pewter plate, which will then go to a dry, warm spot up above the cook stove to evaporate a little more moisture off. Because when these hit the salty water of the pot, we want them to absorb that little bit of salt and cook in a flash. It's why we didn't need to add any salt to the dough. Now, you always want to cook your flour well, because not too long ago, the wheat was out there in the fields with the deer and birds and wildlife. Which brings me to the quick point that if you can find local flour milled in your area, grab it with both hands. Skip the big corporate factories. We're trying to do just that in our small town, but it ain't easy.
Our mill is not huge, but we have been in the process for months and months and months of getting state approval to be able to mill and sell our flour. So that means a clean room, that means inspections, that means all sorts of different layers of state approval. It's so important to us to be able to buy local flour from your neighbors and your friends, not some big corporate structure, that we are willing to jump through those hoops and try to get this off the ground.
Robbie's great-grandfather actually had the first flour mill in our small town not that long ago. But the days of your local mill have been gone for a century. But I'll tell you this, we have lost something very special in those old wheat varieties. Their flavor is unlike anything at the store today. And we ought to be getting food from our neighbors.
Small farm grown, small farm milled. We're just hankering for it in a world that has deprived us of any bond with our food producers, and frankly, our food has just become bland, flavorless, almost nutritionless.
Now, if you're interested in tasting some of this flour, it's not available yet, but we are on the books for final inspection, and we hope to be allowed to share it soon, maybe even by Christmas. I'll keep you posted, so hit that subscribe button and check in on our small online store.
So, long rant cut short. First attempts with the durum flour, homemade pasta. Look at that. Let's get it.
So into the boiling water, the Garganelli goes. Now, at home on a modern range, that's easy as sin. But out here with a wood-burning stove, getting water to a rolling boil is hard.
Get ready?
Ready.
It got there while we were carving pumpkins, but the pasta wasn't ready yet. Now that the pasta is ready, well, the water has lost its boil. So with hungry kids and a hungry husband popping in, I am trying every trick in the book to get that water hotter. One method on an old stove is to take the cast iron grate off and put the pot directly over the fire itself. Now this is a copper pot lined with tin. It can handle this heat. And sometimes this trick works. But today, it is just not doing it fast enough. So, heap on the firewood, more small kindling pieces, as dry of wood as I can sort from the woodpile. Out here, I would kill for oak or ash, but all we have is pine. Pine and the occasional treasured chunk of fir. Frankly, today, I'd kill for fir, but it's not to be.
We get a little bit of kindling and a little bit of wood with every chop, don't we?
Well, you can start on some more.
So, chop some more pine, knots and all, and get it into this firebox. People are hungry. Now I had a meat sauce to add to this, and I had dreams of fancy cream sauces. But after hours on this simple food, we've all agreed butter and a dash of salt is gonna do us just fine. Into the finally boiling water goes the pasta. Putting a lid over the top was the last trick I had to use to get it to a boil. This batch of pasta we made, it's actually double the amount that went into this pot, but I held some back to try making ravioli for dinner later in the evening. Now again, the trick I somewhat failed at is getting them thin enough. Thinner would be better, but the flavor, excellent. The harshest of critics will be my proof of that.
All right.
A quick straining from the pot, add a pat of butter, and what say the judges?
Where would you like to sit, George? One for George?
Where's the stool?
There you go.
This is a grown-up's bowl. Mmm, so good. Good.
There you have it. Good. I'll take good. For a 3-ingredient meal plus a little salted water and butter, good sounds wonderful. Like so many skills, pasta making takes a little repetition to get the feel for. But what a wonderful 18th century food to get hooked on. An Italian immigrant or a son or daughter of America's early Jeffersonian days may well have been out here on the prairie, back in the Homestead era, and known this food. Thanks for cooking with us in the cabin. We'll hope to see you next Saturday. Cheers.
Grab one.
That one looks bad, Mom.
Thanks, George.